If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. You can't plan for bad days, but you can prepare for them. Like nobody can plan for a bad day. Like, hey, what are you doing Tuesday? Suffering, I guess. Hey, does pain and hardship and depression work really well for you? No, I think I'm busy on Tuesday. Could you try never? Okay, sorry, that's not going to work. We're going to have to schedule you in. All right, Thursday after work. Could we just get the suffering over with? You can't plan for bad days, but here's what you can do. You can prepare for bad days. See, Jesus, his entire life was preparing for this moment. Luke 2:52 tells us that he grew in wisdom and stature with favor of God and with others. Even as a little boy, he is preparing for these days. See, God sent his son Jesus to enter into this world, and this is the whole reason that Jesus came. This day, Jesus has been preparing. He has been looking forward to. He has been moving forward to his last day. When Jesus was a little boy in Nazareth, he learned and he had to develop relationships. He had a mother and a father. He had brothers and sisters. He did all of that without sin. As Jesus enters into his ministry, all of that was preparing him for that moment. And then he comes into his ministry. He is baptized to identify with sinners, preparing himself. He goes into the wilderness. What is he doing? He is preparing himself. He gathers the disciples unto him, and he is preparing himself. Every miracle, every healing, every teaching, everything that Jesus did was to prepare himself for this moment. And when that moment comes, Jesus is ready. Jesus is prepared. That's what he's doing here. He has prepared himself for what he is about to experience, the worst day of his life. Jesus was prepared. Now, the disciples, not so much. The disciples, they were not ready, even though Jesus has already prepared them multiple times. If you know that in Mark, we've already seen 3 times where Jesus has prophesied his death. Mark chapter 8, he says the Son of Man will be killed, and 3 days later, he will rise again. You know what Peter said? That's never going to happen. And then Jesus rebukes him and says, get behind me, Satan. They're like, I thought my name was Peter. No, today you're Satan. Bad day when Jesus calls you Satan, amen? He does it again in Mark chapter 9. Given a little bit more detail, and it just goes right over their heads. They're like, I have no clue what you're talking about, Jesus. Mark chapter 10, he prepares them yet again. And you know what he says? He says, the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and scribes, beaten, flogged, he will be crucified, and then on the 3rd day, he will rise again. James and John, you know what they say? They say, okay, that's great, but when we get to heaven, can we sit in your gold chair? Can we be the greatest? And Jesus is like, you guys ain't ready. And then here one more time, Friday night, the worst day of his life. He says, I will strike the shepherd. He's talking about his death. The sheep will scatter. Those are the disciples. They will run away. And then 3 days later, I will rise and I will meet you in Galilee. What is Jesus doing here in that moment? He is preparing his disciples for the worst day of their lives. Think about it if you were the disciples. That the rabbi, the teacher, the leader, the person you have devoted your life to is going to be murdered, and you're going to witness it, watch it, and you're going to run away, and you're going to fail, you're going to coward, and you're going to hide. This is probably the worst day of the disciples' life too. And so Jesus, for the worst day, he is prepared, but for the disciples on their worst day, they're not ready. They're not prepared. Many of us, we read about the disciples and we think, oh, how terrible of them. I can't believe that they would deny Jesus. I would never do that. You sound just like Peter. I will never deny you. Yet if we're honest, we shouldn't make fun of the disciples. We should recognize that we are the disciples. Because truthfully, when trauma, hurts, hardships, and difficulties come our way, we respond not like Jesus, but we respond like the disciples. We run away from them. We avoid them. We ignore our problems. We bury our past, and we try to avoid the worst days of our lives. We do no different than what the disciples do. Why? Because you and me, we're not prepared. We're not prepared for pain. That's the whole point of being an American, is to try to buy things to avoid pain, to have experiences to avoid pain. That's why we're all addicted to our phones, so that way we can escape the pain of our lives. This is why you stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching Lost for the 13th time. because you're trying to escape something in your life. This is why you play video games. This is why you give into alcoholism or go back into your drug addiction. This is why you download pornography or seek relationships with people that you have no business being in relationships with, because you're trying to avoid or to escape or to diminish some sort of pain, because just like the disciples, you don't want to face it. You're not ready. And so just like the disciples, when pain comes, what do? We fold like lawn chairs because we can't handle it. I just want to tell you something. I don't know if people have ever told you this before, but you're going to suffer. I know this isn't the sermon you wanted. It's not like you woke up on a Sunday morning and you're like, life changed through Jesus. Oh, let's go to church. And then you hear the sermon where the pastor says, you're going to suffer. You're going to hurt. You're going to have scars. Listen, nobody makes it out of this life alive. I was reading a book called What Doesn't Kill Us, The New Science of Post-Traumatic Growth, and what it says is the average American, more than half, will experience acute post-traumatic stress syndrome in their life. Acute, that's not chronic, but that is acute. About a 6-month period of every person's life where when you close your eyes, all you do is repeat the worst day of your life over and over and over and over again. Anxiety, insomnia, guilt, shame, repeated patterns of arrested development and stunted emotions. The one thing we all have in common is we'll suffer. The other thing we have in common is we pretend we don't. We're not ready. We're not prepared. And what we see at the beginning of this text, on the worst day of Jesus' life, you know what he's really concerned about? Preparing the people he loves the most. And so what I want to do is I just want to help you. I want to take a page out of Jesus' book and I want to prepare you. I want to prepare you for the suffering that you will experience in this life. Truth is, we're all going to suffer. It's not a question of if you will suffer. That would be nice, wouldn't it? It'd be nice if, what do you mean? If I suffer, that would be, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when we do suffer, will we suffer well? Will we suffer alone, or will we suffer like Jesus?